Hello, ladies. I hope everyone is doing well and feeling motivated today. For those of you who haven't, I encourage you to check out my first video, which kind of gives an overview for why I felt moved to create this channel, and how someone can take steps to pinpoint causes and begin to address declining or even a complete lack of intimacy within their marriage or otherwise committed relationship. Once again, this is not a channel which focuses on dating advice for singles. For you single ladies, especially you young ladies, I do not recommend trying to forge this level of connection with a man who hasn't proven his willingness to commit to you. We're pro-sex, but also pro-loyalty. Like peanut butter and jelly, my friends, best enjoyed together. So this video right now is about helping us build up empathy for the men in our lives, alright? And how best to relate to them sexually as a sort of springboard into this endeavor. Even if you yourself aren't feeling heard or seen in the way that you'd like, even if you don't feel like he gets you, you still have the agency to help break this cycle. And if you are genuinely seeking alternatives to an empty marriage and probable divorce, it'll mean taking initiative towards slowing the momentum on that out-of-control snowball careening down the mountain. And that takes guts, my friend. That takes courage in the current social climate, which celebrates you pushing the snowball all the way to the bottom until you end up screaming at each other in family court while everyone around the two of you is swept up in a nasty avalanche of emotional fallout. So while we're taking the initiative and putting forth the effort to understand our men, why in the world do they want sex so much? No, it's not something he's been tricked or conditioned or socialized into by society at large. It's not something he's doing on purpose to annoy or burden you. It's not just another arbitrary activity he enjoys like playing Monopoly or watching a movie, and he hasn't simply gotten his priorities out of order and needs you to set him right. This is a very real, very visceral, and very potent biological drive for most healthy men before a certain age range. The best analogy for framing this is hunger. No, I know your man won't literally die without sex, but that's how powerful the male drive is, and it's something that's very easy for all of us to relate to. It's not just that he's in the mood, he's hungry, and his body is screaming at him to do something about it. I want you to imagine a scenario in which you haven't eaten in 3 days, but everyone around you is gaslighting you and asking why you're so obsessed with food all the time. You simply don't get to pick when you get hungry, and you can only distract yourself from it for so long before it's nearly the only thing you can think about. And if the only cook, that's you ladies, capable of serving him up a proper home-cooked meal made with love, seems like they'd rather do anything but maybe throw out some cold oatmeal every once in a while as an afterthought, feelings of irritation, neglect, and resentment begin to creep in. Those same things you experience when you feel unseen in your own needs. Just because he's quieter about it doesn't mean it's not gnawing at him. Because ladies, we need to understand that for men, sex is not just sex, and not all sex is equal. Going back to our culinary spread, we have 1,000 different choices across a spectrum from cold, flavorless oatmeal all the way to a 5-course meal with filet mignon and dessert served after. Yeah, maybe cold oatmeal will stave off the hunger pains, but there's no enjoyment. There's no mouth-watering delight and gratitude for the chef who probably once upon a time served up some pretty memorable meals. If anything, that particular juxtaposition only makes the oatmeal feel more like a bitter insult than a concession, and eventually you're just going to throw up your hands and make a peanut butter sandwich or a bowl of cereal, if you catch my drift. Because at least then, you don't have to wait for someone else to take pity and decide you're finally hungry enough. But done right, sex is pleasure and release and affection and love all wrapped up in a neat little package for both of you. However, if we're being honest, a lot of ladies have unintentionally cultivated a starvation mindset in their husbands. Inconsistency is your worst enemy here, my friends, and we inadvertently dig ourselves deep into these vicious cycles of resentment which hurt us as well as the men in our lives. Because scarcity, never knowing exactly when your next meal is coming, breeds feelings of distrust and desperation, which in turn brings out your own feelings of being overwhelmed and put upon, while having your own emotional needs go underfulfilled. So you pull away, and he chases, and you pull back further, and he begs, and you run harder, and he paws at you while you cringe because, geez Louise, why is everything always about sex with you when all I want is a hug and some encouragement? But that's why we need this perspective, ladies, because while you shrink back, waiting for him to just wake up and get it, he is a hungry man going to bed next to and I hope you'll forgive my dehumanizing language for the sake of the analogy, a mouth-watering steak every night. Your very presence over time becomes a taunt and a provocation to this hunger drive he feels. And this constant gnawing hunger is not a headspace conducive to growing the sort of emotional closeness I know you're missing and craving. And he feels your resentment. The fact that this very real and inescapable need he feels is perceived as a burden by the woman he wishes more than anything to share it with. And it breaks his heart, ladies. I'm telling you this in love, that you hurt him deeply with your inconsistent care. Just like it hurts you when he subsequently pulls back from acknowledging your needs. So, in order to step out of this cycle where our needs and his needs are seen as constantly being in competition with one another, we need to be intentional with our intimacy. It may even feel overwhelming or uncomfortable at the outset, but that's okay. I'm rooting for you because we're building something better, all right? And it won't stay that way. Once you achieve consistent intimacy, and I'm not even saying particularly frequent, although building forward momentum here is certainly the goal, but simply seeking consistency as a solid foothold, even if it's just once a week as a start, like I suggested in my first video, will go a long way to alleviating that scarcity mindset. Let me give you a real-world example of this starvation mindset. A couple years ago, a stray kitten showed up in my yard, very underweight and malnourished. For the first month or two, every time I fed this cat, he was ravenous. He cried for food constantly and scarfed down every morsel like it'd be snatched back at any moment. That's pain, ladies. That's neglect. This cat, while definitely annoying as he desperately voiced his needs the only way he knew how, wasn't trying to burden me. He simply wanted someone to care about this desperation he'd been conditioned into through the inconsistent meeting of his needs. And the good news is, once he finally learned that, yeah, he is actually going to get fed on a regular schedule from now on, that someone actually cares and isn't going to suddenly stop caring, he settled down. Food isn't the only thing he thinks about anymore. He doesn't eat so fast he chokes. He doesn't inhale it all until the bowl is empty. He doesn't hunt down human table scraps most cats wouldn't sniff twice. There's balance now. So that's what we're shooting for. Consistency, which lets our men know that yes, I see you and I'm going to prioritize you even though our schedules are busy and life moves quickly. Because this consistency is going to build up the foundation of trust and stability that will then allow your man to focus on something apart from how hungry he is all the time. And that newfound focus is what is going to allow you space to pursue that softer intimacy, which no doubt has felt neglected in your own heart. Those tender touches in passing, cuddling at night, heartfelt discussions, whatever it is that you want more of without getting prodded during. This will allow you freedom to get more of that. Because as time goes on, these things will become delicious appetizers and cherries on top, rather than a cruel taunt of an empty belly. Now, the beauty of this is that it's not a quid pro quo where you're capitulating to his needs simply so that you now have the freedom to pursue yours. Because as time goes on and you enter this cycle of intentionality where attentiveness gives way to desire, gives way to emotional closeness, all of these things will eventually become so closely interconnected that the lines begin to blur together. So where there once was a hard black and white line between your needs and his wants, which really are needs as we just learned, it becomes a beautiful gradient filled with so many shades of love and affection and intimacy, which are now allowed to play off of and encourage one another. Because where we women crave that sense of safety and acceptance in order to be physical, men likewise crave the safety and having these needs met in order to be emotional. This is where we get ourselves in trouble with that vicious feedback loop once again. You shrink back from the physical because you feel emotionally neglected or otherwise unfulfilled, while he pulls back emotionally because he sees that you aren't taking his physical needs seriously. But once we break free of that cycle, once we begin working to cut the strings that we've attached to our intimacy within our marriage, then these two seemingly adversarial drives morph into something so incredibly beautiful and complementary. Because the more he feels seen and accepted for who he is, that private side of himself he's not allowed to show anyone else, which yes, his sexuality, but that's not all I'm getting at here, the more he will also crave that softness, that closeness, that emotional intimacy with you. because now there's trust being established there that you're going to take him seriously, that you're not going to suddenly pull back again, that you do not view him as dirty or damaged or a burden for who and what he is on a fundamental level. And the more you feel like you're finally getting all that safety and non-sexual intimacy that you've been longing for in the midst of this journey, the more that's going to begin reinforcing a positive attitude towards those more deeply physical moments you found yourself avoiding in the past. Over time, this will compound with each of you feeling more and more secure in your own needs, so that you are now able to give that much more freely and eagerly. Now the cycle is inverted. Instead of perpetuating distance and resentment, we're intentionally cultivating mutual love and trust and intimacy in our marriage. Now, before I leave off, I really want to touch on one more thing to help us better understand and appreciate where our husbands are coming from, and will hopefully help reframe our thinking as we take those first steps down this road to improving our intimacy in our marriages. Men, as I'm sure you've noticed, by and large are far more tactile, whereas women tend to be more verbal and emotional. This is where we get our wires crossed, as I said earlier. So all that hunger talk aside, we need to reframe our thinking around our men's cues, because we miss so much nuance when we write off body language and touch as superfluous. That hand on your back is an I love you, not an addition to your to-do list. That hug from behind is I want to keep you safe, not a request to use your body for empty gratification. That look is a pedestal where you sit above every other woman in his eyes. Those hands all over your bits aren't greed, but rather the purest form of desire and affection which he's pledged to save only for you. He sees these things as a gift of the highest order because that is the image of love that he himself craves, and you cannot possibly fathom how much it would mean for him to get these things mirrored back to him. Those physical touches, yes, even the naughty ones, carry so much emotional weight behind them, which is so often overlooked, taken for granted, or viewed as shameful and pushy. We do ourselves a grave disservice, ladies, when we shut down our husbands' natural inclinations to show physical intimacy and desire. We start those cycles of distance and confusion and resentment. So let's shift our focus to see and appreciate the intent behind these acts for what they are. Gifts of love, loyalty, and commitment for you above every other human being on the planet. That is a beautiful thing in a world saturated in heartbreak and loneliness. So I hope you found this helpful and you're encouraged to move forward while giving grace to yourself, to other women in similar situations, and to the man in your life who's just waiting for you to open the door again. Until next time, ladies, take care.